your way. Most of the time you go to the public, it spoils your blood. You see, the Italian economist Vilfredo Pareto, while trying to study the economic discrepancies in his nation, he came up with a mathematical formula today popularly known as the Pareto Principle. And he concluded that 80% of the wealth in that nation is controlled by 20% of the populace. That has since been extended to various fields of endeavor, including motivation, to suggest 80% of the results come from 20% of your efforts. The secret, therefore, is to identify the 20% that deliver the 80%. Selection is the name of the game. Wisdom is not just knowing what to do, but knowing what not to do. Wisdom is not just knowing who to meet, but knowing who not to meet. They are precious people in the sight of God. They are precious people to their families, but they might not be valuable to your personal brand, to your time. And you must differentiate between what you need and what you want. The second brand feature is character. Character. You know, the leading cause of stress in the world is something we call incongruency. Incongruency is a situation whereby there is a difference between your stated values and your values. You are two different faces to two different groups. That is the leading cause of stress around the world. So you perform in a certain manner, and when you go to another group, you are another person altogether. I suggest to you tonight, guard your brand. Guard your character with your life. Don't set two signals, conflicting signals to the market. Because the moment your authenticity is questioned, people can listen to you once or twice or thrice. I'm so glad to God. Every meeting we are having, we started when we were 35, August last year. I can tell for sure every single meeting we are growing by the day. You can cheat people for a month or two, but you can sustain it for 2 or 3 years. A priest can come to town. Everybody buys his vision, his dream, based on what he says. 6 months later, they don't listen to what he says, they listen to his life. Is it consistent with what he says? Guard your brand. You see, perhaps the greatest fighter in human history is Napoleon Bonaparte. Ruled Europe for 20 years at his own will, before he was finally exiled in 1815 by the British to one of the most remote islands in the world, St. Helena. And finally, on the 5th of May, 1821, he died mysteriously. And because he wanted to show off his might, he engaged on a conquest that was meaningless. He conquered the world, but he couldn't conquer himself. How often great men and women are brought down from splendor to ruins because they are unable to conquer their own lives. They have no self-control. He conquers, he who conquers himself. Brand feature number 3. Consistency. Ray talked about it. Let me just build up on her case. Let me ask you a very simple question. The last time somebody called you, this person never called you for 5 years, and then they look for your phone number. What did they tell you? Believe me, I get this kind of calls, including this morning. I received a call from someone who've not called me for 5 years. And almost 95% of the cases, I know how they're looking for me. They're asking me for one thing. Can you come and speak? I'm asking you a question. The moment people remember you, what do they remember you about? That tells about your brand. If somebody doesn't call you for 2 years and suddenly they remember about you, what reminds them about you? Believe me, anytime somebody remembers there was a guy called Kenyanjui, they have a speaking engagement and they're looking for a good speaker. That's what reminds them that I exist. I love coffee. Every time I go to Java, I am sure about their quality. Consistency doesn't mean you're not growing. You are growing, yes, but you have the same product, you have the same brand. You're developing, but the same brand. You're doing the same thing. What I remember about Volvo? Safety. What comes to your mind when you hear about Disney World? Family entertainment. Correct? What comes to people's mind when they hear about you? That's the question of consistency. Day in, day out. Because a brand must be predicted with precision. It must be dependable. People must know if they give a call to Kenyanjui, he's doing public speaking. And this takes me to my 6th point today. I'm going to call it Brad price. Brad price. And the reason I said we must speak slightly about this is because there's not a single strong Brad that was built while people were sitting on the couch. Dr. Charles C. Blair says, the greatness of a man is determined by the cause he lives for and the willingness to pay the price for his achievement. Two things. What cause do you want to live and die for? Two, are you willing to pay the price? How much are you willing to pay for that cause? Winston Churchill once said, the price of greatness is responsibility. I'll try to throw one or two great brads for your thinking. You know, on his trial, before he was sentenced to life imprisonment, Nelson Mandela was given a chance to change his stand on apartheid. He refused. He said that, I quote, I cherish the ideal of a free and democratic society in which all persons share equal rights and equal opportunities. Is an ideal I live for and hope to achieve, in which, if needs be, I'm prepared to die. He was thrown into that notorious Robben Island for 27 rocking years. Please understand, he was a lawyer of good standing. He had a good customer base. He sacrificed his family. He sacrificed his freedom. He sacrificed growing up. He could have chosen to live an honorable life like every other person. And perhaps his family also urged him to quit politics. But he refused. He paid the price. He paid the price. One time, I was just listening to the late Dr. Miles Munro, and he gave a moving story about how he went to visit President Nelson Mandela. Many people wanted to take a picture with him. And on this time, he was so lucky that he was given an audience by President Mandela. There were a number of people from the Bahamas, including their prime minister. When he shook Mandela's hand, he was a little bit disturbed. And the President Mandela, realized that. And he looked at Miles and said, young man, I realize you're a bit disturbed about the roughness of my hand. And unfortunately, Miles Munro was embarrassed to admit, yes, for sure. Then Mandela looked at him and said, you know, for those years you had I was in prison, I was working on rocks in the quarry. That's why my hands are so rough. Then he added something so critical. That's the price of freedom. Nathaniel Hill, a French 21-year-old boy. During the war in Britain, two people stood up. He refused to give up. When he was captured, he refused to betray his nation. And he said, I regret that I have only one life to give for my country. At the age of 19, Joan of Arc, some of you have heard about her. She decided to join the army. She decided to join the cause. At some point, they had to jump over a fence. And the general said, nobody is going to jump. She said, I'm going to lead the men over the fence. The general said, no one is going to follow you. And you know what was her reply? I'll not be looking behind to see whether anyone is following me. Then she was tied along a stake. In those days, they used to tie people along a stake and then put them ablaze. But she refused to capitulate. She stood for a cause and said, it's far worse to live a long life for nothing than to die at the age of 19 for something. You know, in Washington, D.C., they have many monuments. Maybe the most recognized one is for the father, George Washington, the man who founded the nation, and the other one for the man who kept the nation, Abraham Lincoln. In between is an inscription for a young man by the name Martin Treptow, who decided to leave his barber shop and join what they were calling the famed Rainbow Division. It was one of the army barracks that went to join the First World War, in 1917. And when he was passing the message from his bosses in the army, he was shot and killed. Then they found a diary, and then he had written something in that diary, my pledge. I'll fight, I'll work, I'll live, I'll do everything as though the issue of this entire struggle depended on me alone. The first governor of Freedom America of Virginia, Patrick Henry, it's one of the monuments elected in the US. During their war with the British, and people gave up because it was one of the heaviest winters in history. He said that, I quote, if life is so dear and peace is so sweet as to be changed for the price of slavery, forbid it, Almighty God. I know not what course others may take, but as for me, Give me liberty or give me death. During the height of racial segregation in the US, a black woman refused to go to the back seat. They were required to sit at the back and the white people in front. And she simply said, my feet hurt. And they pushed her and she fell off the bus. Her name is Rosa Parks. And because of that single act of courage, an entire people stood up and marched forward against racism because one woman was willing to pay the price. This is exactly where Martin Luther King Jr. got his inspiration from. And talk of Martin Luther King. I don't know whether you know this. There are many great men in America who will never have a monument. They'll never erect a monument for many presidents. They'll never have a day in their name. But the third Monday of January in the US, guess which day is that? Martin Luther King. Because he was willing to pay the price. Greatness doesn't have to be in politics. Greatness can be found in small deeds. That's what Mother Teresa said. Done with love over and over and over again. However, today, you may not be required to pay the price of the pharaohs I've talked about. In the foreseeable future, may God give us peace. But I want to suggest to us tonight that greatness is preceded by slaying a giant. And there are giants around us here in Nairobi. You can choose to clean up Nairobi River. You can run with that. That is why we recognize Wangari Maathai. It is planting trees. She identified a giant. Desertification. She decided this is the cause I'll live and die for. Many times she was beaten by the then regime, but she stood for the environment. That's why today we enjoy walks at Karura Forest. We enjoy walks at Uhuru Park. That's why today we have Jivanji Gardens at Arboretum, because one woman knew she could make a difference. There are many other people who had studied environmental science. A friend of mine, her name is Samuel Muragori Mwangi. He was doing some missionary work. They went to Congo. And other people came. As usual, they forgot about it. But he was touched by the fact that these are short, forgotten people who are cannibalized, and nobody said anything about it. He went back and did a very intense research for 2 years, compiled a book known as Pygmy World. He lives in the US right now. And he has been raising funds that have been helping him do that to make a difference. Can you imagine people who are being cooked by the others rather than people cooking goats? But Muragori decided, I can make a difference. And you're here wondering what you can do, but you can fight corruption. You can fight tribalism right in this country. You can stand for something in Kenya. There is a giant you can slay. Greatness is preceded by slaying a giant. For how long shall we quote Nelson Mandela? For how long shall we quote Martin Luther King? Why not your name Hussein? Why not your name Betty? Identify a giant and die with it. Point number 7 and the last one. Blood legacy. Blood legacy. You see, when I was writing my note, originally I wrote that your personal blood follows you until the day you die. I changed my mind last week. Now I think your blood does not die when you die. You see, Bruce Lee died in 1973. He has earned 9 million posthumous. Vyodo Geisha, an author, died in 1991. He has earned 9 million postmortem. Albert Einstein died in 1955. Records show he has earned 11 million after his death. He died in 1955. He's still earning money. A cartoonist, American cartoonist, Charles Schulz, has earned 40 million after his death in the year 2000. And the leading in the pack, Michael Jackson, after his death in 2009, he has made 140 million US dollars. While we may not have authentic details about the Brad Mandela monetary-wise, undoubtedly he was the leading Brad in the world. By the time he died, he has 260 awards in his name. Your Brad goes beyond you. Now I want to tell you something here. Seal your Brad legacy by giving back to the community. That is the reason why Warren Buffett has determined to give away 96% of his wealth to philanthropy. That is why Bill Gates has founded Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. KCB Equity Bank are educating children. My precious friend Tabitha and her husband Karaja have started Keroche Foundation. If you must be remembered, your name shouldn't be inscribed on the epitaph of the tombstone, but on people's hearts. That's the only time you live beyond your life. You live beyond your grave. And maybe before you even talk about living, giving so much, let me talk about the little giving before we talk about the big giving. Please, for heaven's sake, beloved Kenyans, if you invite someone for coffee, pay the bill. This is how we lose our blood. Let me tell you, so many Kenyans call me, I can't attend to so many calls. What I find so funny, somebody is looking for me. I don't charge, I don't do counseling, I've told you before. I'm a public speaker, but I offer my time to people. And somebody calls me, yesterday, somebody called me, and he's not a Kenyan. So I rescheduled my programs because this is somebody, but from Africa. And then the fellow is waiting for me to pay the bill. That's Africa for you. People are looking for you, and they also expect you to pay the bill. It has nothing to do with how much I have. It has everything to do with how you respect your brand. Honor yourself, respect yourself. Don't sell yourself cheaply. Because you can't convince me you'll pay cleaning Nairobi River if you can't pay for your cup of tea. Am I making sense? By the way, this has everything to do with your brand. Trust me. Trust me, I have had the privilege of sitting with many senior people. And I don't want to mention names. Many senior people. And I can tell you, I will not allow them to pay my bill if I looked for them. It doesn't matter what they have. It's immaterial. Because I respect my personal brand. But let me give you a story, a real story from history. A young boy was drowning in a lake. He was the son of a Scottish nobleman by the name Rudolph. Then a nagemate spotted him by name Alex and went to rescue him. Alex came from a contrasting family, a very poor family. Now the father of this young man who was drowning, Rudolph, decided to come to Alex's father, and he decided to pay him. So he asked him, please sir, I want to pay you. Quote the price. Alex's father refused. The guy came a few days later and they said, okay, fine. Can I then take your son Alex to the same schools that I'll take my son? That one I'll agree, Alex's father said. And Alex had the chance to go to some of the finest universities in England. And finally, he went to St. Mary Hospital Medical School. And he specialized with immunology. He finally became the man who gave the world what we call penicillin. In full, his name is Alexander Fleming. Later on, the same young man who had drowned by the lake, or rather who was drowning by the lake, in the lake, he was attacked by pneumonia. And guess what saved him? Penicillin. So Alex ended up saving this young man twice. The name of the man I'm talking about, the young man who was saved by Alex twice, is Sir Winston Churchill, who saved the world during the Second World War. Give, and it shall come back to you. Learn to give. You seal your blood legacy by giving. Go back to the high schools where you come from. Participate in those boards. Let one of us go to Pumwani Hospital. You don't have to do a lot, but you can buy a bed. You'll have made a contribution. You can go to our prisons and make the conditions better. These are fellow Kenyans, most of them innocent. Identify and pay the price. Go back to your pocket. It's a shame for our nation in the year 2016 to be receiving donations from the West. It has something to do with our brand. We have sold ourselves on the global map cheaply. We are the people to change. I want to leave you with a challenge, a serious challenge. Shall you reveal your brand? That's a challenge I want to leave you with. Are you afraid of yourself? Are you afraid of revealing your brand? Are you afraid of letting the world know who you are? I want to leave you with that challenge. And the primary reason why you're going to be distracted by this challenge is by living for others, living for a show. Had Mandela lived for others, we wouldn't be knowing his name today. Please, I urge you, don't attempt to become a celebrity. The idea never lasts for more than 2 seasons. Seek to be a legend. While celebs make headlines, legends make history. There's nothing wrong with going to the media. I've been there several occasions.